Warning. Because of the subject matter, death, loss, and grief, and the emotional nature of the conversation, this episode might be potentially triggering. Please assess your own psychological state if you're ready to consume such content, and be gentle with yourself. Listener discretion is advised. I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. Today, I'm sharing my immediate experience after the sudden passing of my dad. My dear friend Christy Lorisella held space for me as I wanted to share the news and what I'm going through right now with you, my listener. I tell some stories, process my grief, and we both share some helpful tips about grieving, talking to kids about death, and coping with loss. I hope by hearing my personal story, you can find universal themes and value for yourself, as loss and grief for many have been real issues in the past year. Thank you for listening. Well, Christy, hi.
Hi, Anna. So good to see you.
Likewise. Here we are again, recording after a very long time. It's been 2 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
Right?
I was on the floor with you in your bedroom recording. Remember?
Yes, we did. It was right after the conference, or Authentic Parenting Conference. We did an episode, and it resonated with a lot of people. I love that episode because it was in person, right? We're friends.
Yeah.
We did it in person, and we talked about important things. I think the title of that episode is Why We Need to Connect More.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I titled.
And little did we know that we were heading into a very long year of both isolation and connection.
True. And in this whole time, we have spoken a few times, correct? We have met once during the pandemic, or maybe twice.
I think once we walked through town.
Yeah, we walked through town, and because
we were talking about our frustrations with the school system and how things were going with our children.
True. Yes. And it was very, very cold, right?
Yeah.
We got coffee, but the coffee got so cold, right, in an instant in our hands because the weather was so cold. But after that, we had a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I said, Anna, I have some good ideas about what I want to talk with your listeners about. And I shared them with you, and you were like, that's too depressing.
Well, why not? I know, because it was, first of all, it was the year of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we were covering, pandemic related topics as it is. And when you drop the idea of death, right? Dying, death, grieving, yes, it is relevant to our time. But I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's too much. Mm-hmm. My listeners will tune out and unsubscribe and just leave me because it's going to be too dark. But why don't you tell us what you do now? 2 years have passed. A lot has changed in your life career-wise. Mm-hmm. So I would love for you to inform us. What is it that you do and why this topic of death even was of interest to you?
Yeah. In August of this pandemic year, I started a new career of medical social work. So I work in a hospital setting as a palliative care social worker. And in that context, I support people who have serious illness and I help them navigate their healthcare, and I support their families and the patients emotionally. And I help them make decisions about their care so that they're empowered and they're fully informed about the progression of their disease. And sometimes I get to meet folks at the very beginning of a diagnosis, and other times I'm meeting folks near the end of their life. And I'm very passionate about advanced care planning, which is putting your medical wishes in writing. And ideally, that would be something that's discussed before you're in a crisis, because it's much harder to make decisions for someone else if you've never spoken to them about whether or not they would want a particular treatment or a course of treatment or what have you. So it's become a real passion of mine over the years. And I think it was definitely informed by the passing of my grandparents, two of whom did pass away home on hospice in very peaceful, loving settings. And one of my grandparents who passed away in a hospital setting, which probably wouldn't have been his preferred way to go, but it's how it happened. And watching my parents struggle to care for their loved ones. I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is where I came to love this work and to know that I can make a difference in the trajectory of a person's life. Because once you get seriously ill, your healthcare and medical appointments become such a huge part of your day-to-day living.
Yeah, and you're left with your relatives, and it can create, I can assume, I only imagine, like if you have a few children and a wife and everybody has different ideas, it can create such conflict even, right? In families.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, some families, it's a dream come true and everybody knows what the patient wants and they're all on the same page. Some families designate one decision maker and that person leads the whole, process.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do have, unfortunately, situations where everyone has a different perspective and there's a lot of conflicting points of view.
Oh my gosh. And what is your role in this situation where let's say the family members have different ideas? Do you have a role in that, in sort of coaching and mediating?
Yeah. Well, ideally, if the patient is still able to make decisions for themselves, I encourage that patient to designate a healthcare proxy, which would then have to be honored by the hospital. We put it in writing and it's notarized, and that person becomes the decision maker. Otherwise, legally, there's next of kin law. So, if I have a sick elderly man who has a wife and she's still alive and capable of making decisions for him, she is the decision maker legally. Now, if she wants to include her adult children in that decision-making process, that's completely up to her. And she can also, forego that responsibility and give that responsibility to her children. But there's like a hierarchy of next of kin who, if in lieu of paperwork, that's who you go to make the decisions. But we've had Zoom calls with members of the medical team and extended family, across the globe, all in one Zoom call, getting an update and discussing the medical care. And I really pride myself on facilitating healthy discussions and keeping the patient's wishes and well-being at the forefront of the conversation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know, your facilitating skills, I'm very well aware of. You have a real gift for that. Even your session at the conference was so powerful, right? I think until now, people talk about it, the exercises that you guided them through, and it was so powerful and transformative. So I'm glad that you're doing this work. But how is it for you, like emotionally, mentally, psychologically? Are you how are you handling it? How are you taking it in? Is it affecting you, or it's becoming work and you are able to separate your life from it?
I feel like I've been well trained and well educated, and I like tell people that it feels like I have like a very, I think, I don't know if it's like a Buddhist philosophy, but like the soft front, strong back kind of. I try to embody that, where I myself feel safe and secure, and I'm creating the space for the anger, the sadness, the frustration. I definitely have. It's so cliche, but I have to take care of myself. I have to prioritize, how I'm spending my time. When I get home from work, I want to be with my family. I don't want to do laundry, and I have to let myself be okay with that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's day to day, it's quite draining. It can be, but if I find myself getting stressed, I'll go for a walk around the campus, or, I'll just take a little time and scroll on TikTok or something, just to kind of give my brain a chance to get distracted for a few minutes. Yeah. So it's challenging, but I feel like I don't know. I can't think of anything more meaningful to do. So I have a lot of fulfillment.
Mm.
This interview is turning into being a lot about me, Anna.
Okay, well then.
And I feel like I'm just rambling on and on about myself, but
well, you're an important part of this conversation.
Yeah.
I asked you to be here for a reason.
Yeah.
As you said it well. Soft front, strong back. I think that's why I love you as a friend. Yeah, I think that's how it's so well said. You do have that. So, and here we are. Yeah, now it's time for you to maybe take the lead.
Yeah, I mean, and I do want to say that my strong back is reinforced by people like you and friendships like yours. I wouldn't be able to be as strong as I am without the love and support of people like you, who I really respect and admire. So thank you.
Yeah, it was mutual.
When you left me a message for my birthday, a voice message, I could tell that there was something off. And, you are such an energetic person, and you always are so thoughtful, and you always leave me messages for my birthday. And I could just sense something was off, and I was super busy and I never replied. And then like a day or two later, you left me another message saying you needed to talk to me. And then I definitely knew something was wrong. And we were able to connect shortly after that message, and you shared with me some big news.
Yeah.
And you asked if I would speak with you about what happened, and I of course agreed. And I know it's been really important for you to want to share your experience with the listeners, and I think it's so important for them to hear what's happened in your life.
Yeah. When you first asked to be a guest on the podcast and talk about death, remember what I said? It became a long conversation. I was, dreading since the time I've been living here in the United States for the past about 20 years. I had this feeling that, one day I'm going to receive this phone call, and, like, it's a matter of when, right? And it was so almost like it's going to come, but of course you don't want it to come. And I didn't know it's going to come now for sure. It's very untimely, but it's like my worst nightmare became true. I used to talk to my dad, maybe once a week or twice a week. He lived in Armenia, and it was Sunday. I was talking to him, and he wasn't feeling particularly in a great mood. He was kind of depressed, and I was trying to cheer him up or say, the winter is almost over, so it's okay, that kind of stuff. But he was very low, negative, and it was a Sunday, and I was walking, and we were talking. We used to have long conversations over an hour, and during those conversations, we shared, recipes. We talked about all sorts of things: politics, news, coronavirus, mutual relatives, everyday life. And I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What are you eating?" He was eating something. And he said, "I'm eating peanut butter." I said, "Wow, what a great idea. I haven't had peanut butter in a long time." So I came home while on the phone with him, took the jar of peanut butter, and I started eating peanut butter with him. It was a special moment that we shared. And I said, "I'll call you in a couple of days just to check on him, to see how his mood was, improving or not." I didn't know that he had any health issues. He didn't mention, he had some complaints about some muscle pain and things like that recent, but nothing major. And Monday went by, I didn't call. Tuesday went by, I didn't call. I get busy with my life. And then on Tuesday, my aunt called me, and she said, "You should call your dad." I said, "I just spoke with him like a couple of days ago." She said, "No, you should really call him now." And she sounded urgent. So I said, "Yeah, sure." I called. He didn't answer. I kept calling. He didn't answer. And then after some time, my uncle picked up the phone, his brother, and he said, "What's going on? Like, why are you calling?" It was late evening there, 10:30 p.m. I said, how is my dad? Where is he? He said, "He's right here. He's not feeling well. I'm here. I just gave him an injection, a blood thinner." I said, "Can I speak with him?" He said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "We're trying to get him to the emergency room, but your dad is refusing." Speak about like people wanting to make decisions for a person. And he said, "Maybe you can convince him." I said, "Sure." And I spoke with my dad. Like, his voice was very different. It was coming like from a hole, like from a very far place, a very different voice. And he used the endearing name that he calls me, and said that he doesn't want to go to the hospital, but they're making him. He said, "Not today, at least. I don't want to go." And I said, "No, you should go," because his breathing wasn't well, and they were suspecting that it's COVID. And he was gasping for air when he was talking to me, and he couldn't breathe. The oximeter was showing very low oxygen in his blood, the at-home test, and they were worried. And I said, no, you should really go, just listen to them. His nephews were there, his brother, everybody was there. I have a tight-knit, very well, a good family, an extended family. And they said, "Okay, yeah." They called the ambulance, and yeah, sure. I said, "Are you sitting or lying down?" He said, "I'm sitting." And he said, "Okay." He said, okay, I'll let you go." It wasn't the usual talk or anything. It was just this conversation. And
in that moment, like I wanted to say, Dad, I love you so much, but I just couldn't. I said, like, good luck. I'll call you later. But what I wanted to say was something completely different, but somehow I couldn't. And then I hung up the phone and, I looked at my husband and my daughter. I said, I have a sense that this was the last time that I spoke to my dad. It was just a feeling that I had. And I started crying, and my husband said, well, don't make a big deal, that's how people, he said, it's okay, don't worry, he's going to be fine, they'll take him to the hospital, don't overreact yet and stuff like that. But I knew, that sense. Then it was evening here. Well, obviously I couldn't call him anymore because they took him to the hospital. And my uncle was informing us, that they took him to the hospital and we can't call him. They put him in an isolation, so nobody definitely cannot be with him or, call. He can't make a phone call. But, his last words when he said he doesn't want to go to the hospital were, I don't want to be in an isolation and having no one near me to take care of me, Then it was evening, I went for a walk with my friend and my daughter. We went to get ice cream or something. Like I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And my friend was like, oh, don't be silly, it's going to be fine. The medicine, the hospitals, this and that, at least he's in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And then I come home, it's evening time. It's like 9:38. I looked at the clock. 9:38 p.m. I look at the clock, and on my desk, I have these eye drops that I'm using before bed. And I have a couple of pictures on my nightstand of my mom, me, like a few pictures, and never had a connection with my mom. It's like very lost and cold. Like I don't have any like spiritual connection or any kind of, she never comes to me in my dreams or anything of that nature. But that day, one of the pictures like wanted to be picked up from this nightstand, like I looked at the clock, 9:38. I picked up this picture of my mom in which she's smiling. And I sort of heard her voice in my head that says, I'm taking your dad. I'm taking your dad. And like she was giggling. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, I think my dad is gone. I had this sinking feeling in that moment. I couldn't go to bed, I was in bed, twisting and turning, couldn't sleep. I was waiting till the next morning so I can call my family in Armenia and hear news. And I woke up at 6:30. I called my uncle and, I was hoping I would hear good news, or I didn't know what I was hoping, but I said, hey, how are you? Where are you? How is my dad? And he just froze for a moment and he didn't speak. I said, can you hear me? How is my dad? What are they doing? Did they test him? And he said, I guess you don't know? I said, no, what? And he said, I'm sorry to inform that your dad passed away. I just sat there and I just screamed. I just screeched so loudly that like my family woke up and they just came and they said, what happened, Anna? I said, my dad passed away. They took him to the hospital at 10:30 p.m. and he died towards the morning when it was around 9:38 here p.m. That's it. Then the other stuff happened, attending the funeral by Zoom and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and we couldn't go. It's the worst time with this COVID and travel. And even if we went, we could never make it on time. And what's the point of going if you're going to go into this COVID-ridden society? It's worse there, Mm-hmm. And it was just the worst feeling ever. Mm-hmm. He was 73. Yeah.
And very independent up until that point, correct?
Oh my gosh, yes. He was a health nut. He was making milk from walnuts and eating healthy and doing all sorts of things. And he exercised until the last day, they said, like he didn't know. And I mean, that's the only like peaceful thing, that he didn't know that he was dying. They said he was joking with the nurses when they when they gave him oxygen in the hospital. I guess his body revitalized a little bit. He made a joke with the nurse in his own signature style. And his friend called and he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be out soon," and things like that. So he sort of passed innocently, without knowing.
Was he, I mean, your family has been through a lot because of, the history in your country. And, has your dad, despite all the challenges, generally been a very upbeat and optimistic person?
I don't want to say upbeat and optimistic, more like very deep and thoughtful, life-loving. I think I'm similar to him in that way. You have this morbid sense that life is not eternal. There is death, but you embrace both and you live. And I think I'm more optimistic. I'm not sure if he was optimistic. I think he suffered a lot. He had a terrible childhood. He suffered a lot. And after the earthquake, post-earthquake, there was a lot of suffering in his life. I think like he found meaning in those things. I don't think he had a happy life, but he had a meaningful life. That's how I would say. I don't think I would say he was a happy person. He had a happy life. No. Very arduous, challenging, full of suffering. But he always found meaning, I think. He was a poet. He wrote and processed his feelings. He was a very emotional person, sensitive and kind. And the last time I spoke with him on Sunday, that long conversation, I said, "I'll call you in a couple of days." He said, "Oh, if I'm alive," something like that. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why are you saying those kind of statements?" We had a very good relationship, very good relationship. And I know a lot of people are not lucky to have great dads, but for sure he was my only parent and he was a great dad. For sure. Like only after he passed, I realized that no one ever loved me the way my daddy did. And a lot of people love me, I'm lucky enough to have great family, great friends and cousins, and very tight-knit, great family and friends and supportive people around me. And a lot of people love me. I never felt hate or anything like that. But I think the way my dad loved me, I think it was very special.
Sounds like it. It sounds like that for sure. It sounds like you definitely have a lot of his traits.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's what he would say always in our conversations when he would talk about things and people or psychological matters or relationships. He would say, share something, and I would respond, and he would say, "I knew you'll get me because you are my daughter. I knew you would understand." Like intricate, personal, relational things with people he would always discuss. And I would validate or listen, say my 2 cents. And he would always say that I understand him. But honestly, I don't think, I don't think I fully understood him. There's this lingering sense now that I have a lot of regrets now. Regrets that I didn't show him much of my adult life, adult self, I didn't share with him. You know, I mean, your dad loves you as your dad, but we did interact and socialize. But I wish I had shown him more of my adult self. I don't know. I don't know how to describe that. I have that sense now that, and I have a lot of regrets. There were things that I would have loved to ask him, questions, about life, love, relationships, you know, his parents, his upbringing, you know, lots of things that you always think you have time to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
But now as an adult, I know there is important questions that I want to know the answers, and I will never know. There is that lingering mystery now, the unknown. There was a lot of unspoken stuff between us. You know, yes, I understood him, and yes, he trusted me, and we shared this unspoken love or bond. But I wish we had spoken more about the unspoken things. You know, that's my biggest regret now.
Mm-hmm. There's so many things that you lose when someone dies. It's not just them and their like physical presence on this earth. There's so much loss and so much to grieve. And obviously, as you know, so normal to have these regrets. And at the same time, it sounds like you guys were so intertwined and knew each other so well that whatever your beliefs are about what happens after someone passes away, I mean, how can that bond just evaporate? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Yeah,
where is that? Where that link is still somewhere, even though you can't pinpoint geographically where Dad is right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You know, I mean, when I was 13, I lost my mom. It was different. You know, I'm not going to say it's better now or it's worse now. I don't want to use those kind of binary terms. As a kid, you're still a kid. Yes, it's pain and life is difficult and you grieve and there's always a hole. And it's a different kind of loss. But now that I'm an adult and a parent myself, I don't know. I think you're more conscious almost, or maybe it's new. That's why I'm feeling like this. It feels different. It feels different. Like in some ways, like I'm ready to process and accept and understand, you know, that this is natural, death is natural part of life and that kind of stuff. It brings my own mortality, you know, in the forefront. And I'm able to deal with like grief and feelings better now. I'm more equipped, right? As opposed to when I was a kid, I was just lost and in this chaotic, you know, like the ocean of raw feelings. I think now I am more like ready to feel and understand. And I know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 You know,
you
but
have like the capacity to process it on many levels.
Yeah.
Right. You know, that you didn't have when you were a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also similarly to when you were a child, I'm noticing like losing your mom in like a natural disaster that affected like your, you know, that entire region. And she wasn't even the only family member that you lost, correct?
Right. Yes.
And here you are losing your dad during a global pandemic, you know, that, you know, though you had different different experiences because you're a different age. It's very interesting that, you know, you're losing your dad now at a time when others are also losing loved ones in similar ways.
And that was my worst fear too. You know, I was talking about like the parallels between the pandemic and the earthquake. And I was saying to people who I talk to every day that, you know, during the earthquake, it was this global event. It encompassed the entire nation, the entire region. Everybody had someone, or, you know, there were families. All of the members were dead. There were children whose parents were gone. There were parents who lost their kids. So like everybody around us had loss, as in death, on top of other losses, right? That aspect is very similar to the pandemic, but also it's individual because, you know, you're losing your parent, you're losing your grandma, or you're losing your loved one, but everybody else is in this same pot of grief and loss. It's similar now in some way, you know, and yeah. It's
I know that one of the things you wanted to share with your listeners today were the things that you're doing to begin the healing process.
Yeah, you know, life is a funny thing, honestly. Before this happened, my dad was talking a lot about death, and my cousin sent me a video of him. It's like a 3-minute video. He, you know, it's so interesting when you see a video of someone, you see them, right? Their movements, their energy. It's a powerful thing. In that video, he talks about death and dying and how he embraced it, how it's a different almost chapter in life. And he gives advice to these people who are around the table and they're eating and drinking. And it's sort of a toast, I think he's saying. It's very moving. Like I watched it a million times. This is like a couple of months before he passed. And obviously I didn't know that he was talking about death all the time during the past couple of months. Similarly, I was reading about loss and grief and death here and exploring it on my end. The last book that I read was by David Kessler. I think I mentioned it to you, and I even recommended to you, The Sixth Stage of Grief, Finding Meaning. I was drawn to this. Even my support group calls, I was talking about loss all the time. And I even had an epiphany, you can say. And I was like, I'm going to write a book about loss. You know, lately I've been just talking and immersed and reading about this a lot. It's a strange life's unfolding or a coincidence, you know. There is mysteries in life. I can't just deny that. Another interesting thing happened. So this is a very quick story. You know, in Armenia, they commemorate like there's different stages of grief, how they process. So the 7th day is big. You know, family gets together. They go to the grave and they eat something together. They talk. They grieve. Like they grieve collectively as a family for a year. There is different marking points. So another, you know, after the death, the 1st day and the 7th day is huge. So it was the 7th day of my dad's passing. And, you know, I've been connected to my family this whole time through Zoom and calls, which is like, I have never been grateful for technology in my life than now. During this COVID, we were reading, people are attending funerals and weddings by Zoom. And it was so not personal for me until it became personal, until I attended a Zoom funeral and live. And it was the 7th day. I was walking outside here. It was a nice day. And my neighbor's kids were just playing outside near the playground. And this girl who I'm close to, this family, she's a 4-year-old girl. She's like, oh, Anna, come here, come here. I said, what, sweetie? I went there and she's like, I want to show you something. She held my hand and she took me to this bush and there was a dead chipmunk. And she's like, look, a dead chipmunk. I said, oh, wow. What happened? And she's like, let's go sit there. So this 4-year-old girl who I see every day, I socialize with her. She took me to this bench. We sat there on the bench and she started talking to me in this almost weird way. She's like, that chipmunk suffered and he's dead now and he will never see the future. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I am also afraid to close my eyes because I don't want to die. I said, honey, what's going on? And then she's almost in her own world. She's talking to me. She says, are you afraid of dying too, Anna? I said, yes, honey. And her mom is right there. Her mom looked at me, winked and said, I'm letting you handle this. Like, I'm not part of this conversation. Like, you are, you handle this. And I just sat there for a moment, as if someone poured cold water over me. And I said, I'm not going to mess this up for this kid. Like, this is an important conversation. Like, this can impact even her life, this kind of moments, right? I said, tell me more about it. Even though it's like uncomfortable for me to talk about this with the 4-year-old, having my own, grief right now, it's so fresh. She says, are you afraid of dying? I said, yes. I said, I think everybody is afraid of dying. And she teared up and I was stroking her hair and, petting her. And then she says, but I don't want to die, Anna. I want to see the future. And she keeps hammering on those 2 points. I want to see the future. I said, I understand. I want to see the future too. And so we talked about this together. And she used the word suffering. I mean, what 4-year-old talks about this kind of stuff in a right context, And I'm so like sitting there, I'm like, is this my dad talking to me? Is this God? Like, what is this? And I'm just taken by this experience. And I'm listening to her. She gave me a hug. She keeps saying she doesn't want to die. Why do people have to die and not see the future? And she keeps talking about this for a long time. I said, you know what, sweetheart, you're young now. You're going to have a long, healthy life. And so I gave her like the stages of her development until adulthood. I said, you're going to first be a kindergartner, then you're going to be a first grader, then you're going to be this, then you're going to be a teenager. I said, and I'm going to be part of your life and I want to see you grow and I'm going to see the future with you. And she was not buying any of this, right? And then a switch happened after she shared and she said, oops, Alonso. And she just left. I'm like, her old self back again. And the person who came to pick up the chipmunk from that area, it obviously is the playground. They have to clear that. This person tells to the kids, this is Jerry. Jerry's mom just texted me that Jerry is not listening and ran out of the house. I'm going to take Jerry to his mom. He's speaking about the chipmunk. He doesn't know what kind of deep conversation we just had about the chipmunk before. And I'm just standing there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not hearing this right now. And this 4-year-old looks at me with a smile, with a deep smile. And she goes, that's not right. Right, Anna? I'm like, no, she's not buying it. Obviously, she's not buying it. She's so smart. And it was very, very interesting. And so it's a mystical experience. Whatever you believe in, regardless if you believe in God, in whoever that God is for you, I think regardless of that, there is something mystical in life for sure. It was a very, I don't know what kind of experience. It just shook me to the core of this experience.
Yeah, it's like very intense few minutes. And I do agree. I think that that conversation, whether she remembers it explicitly or not, but what you talked about with her will certainly shape her perspective on death moving forward. And I think, I know this is a parenting podcast, and you always have such amazing guests who provide so much insight into how to raise healthy kids. And I think this is a perfect example of, I don't think it's that extraordinary that 4-year-old was able to talk about that with you. I think that they are so much more capable of having those conversations than adults are.
Yes.
and they just don't have the opportunity to do so. I think we really need to remember when we have a loved one with an illness or who is dying, we really need to think about how we're talking about that illness and that death, and be really honest with our children, because they can, it has to be age appropriate, but they can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much better than just saying, oh, well, you just go to sleep and then you go to heaven. And then, there's like a lot of like really quick explanations that adults use because they're not willing to sit with that discomfort that you were willing to sit with.
Yeah.
And
it was discomfort for sure, but I knew it was also a big moment, and I didn't want to invalidate her.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how people can say, oh, he's in a better place now. Like abstract things that I always cringe when people say those kind of things. But again, they don't know what to say. People, it's not like they don't want to have those conversations. No, they don't want to have because it's uncomfortable. But I think you're right. Children know the truth. We owe them that honesty, and like not dismiss or invalidate them, and just join in and see what they know, where they're coming from. Instead of saying that's Jerry, who is like pretending to be alive and he just ran out of his house and let me take him to his mom. And like, no, that's so distorted. I'm sorry,
But it was coming from a place of wanting to protect
the
children, right?
Yes,
And so like you're saying, like, people have the best intentions usually, but I think one big takeaway from our conversation can be saying he's in a better place is never helpful.
Yes.
I think it totally invalidates, like you said, it totally invalidates, there's certain things that are so classically not helpful, but people say it over and over again. And I'm sure I have made the mistakes too. I happen to be more in tune with it now, but it's just, when you can't even imagine the pain that somebody's going through, you just resort to sometimes saying these really meaningless statements.
I know. I know. And people have said to me, it's been already like 10 days or so. People have been saying all sorts of things to me, but knowing this, that people don't know how to communicate, they have good intentions. I'm very forgiving. I don't take it personally. And it's okay. I have said bad things to people in those moments too, for sure. My friend's mother died of COVID just a couple of weeks ago, and she posted on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, I want to call her, but I don't know what to say, how to say, since I haven't spoken to her in a very long time, years, maybe 10 more years. And like I sat in my discomfort for a long time, and days were going by. But here is me wanting to offer support to this person who I know she's struggling. And I sat there, I said, this is not about your discomfort, Anna. Like, I don't care if you don't know what to say or how to say, and you're just avoiding your own discomfort, but offering the care and the support that you really want to offer. I made myself just call her randomly. She picked up the phone, and I said, I was really didn't know what to say, how to say. I said, but I want you to know that I'm very sorry and I'm here. Let's talk. I was very honest because this is the part of this personal work that we're doing, right? I don't know what to say, and most people say that to me too. My friend Marcy called me and had a long conversation, and we chatted about all sorts of things. And she said, "Oh, Anna, this is not why I called. I called to support you, offer you help when you're grieving." I said, "Marcy, that's what exactly you did. This was it for me. You don't have to talk about my dad or my grief to be support call, I'm still living, breathing. We can talk about Netflix and a show and everything in between, That's the support. I think people think they have to do something special, meaningful, or extraordinary, but they forget that no, it's just ordinary things that matter to us. If you want to reach out to someone, reach out and say, "Hey, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you," or talk about different things. Or my podcast community, I wanted to tell this, the story to my podcast community also because I'm thankful to my small community. When they took my dad to the hospital, we have a group message, with the people who come to the support call every week for the past year. We formed a really deep connection. They're dear friends now. And we text each other, we message each other. And that's the first place I posted. I said, they took my dad to the hospital. And the next message I posted, my dad died. And the podcast, my listeners, they collected money right away. They got together. They sent me this beautiful flower arrangement and a nice, thoughtful card, like right away. That was support and thoughtful. And they've been calling me and contacting me. "What do you need, Anna? I don't know if I should reach out to you." I'm like, "Sure, reach out to me. Don't feel awkward." Yeah, I think we just don't know how to be in those moments.
Yeah. And I think something we were talking about before we started recording, you were saying that these kinds of things that you're talking about have been helpful to you, but they may not be helpful to everyone who's grieving.
Yeah.
And I know you wanted to mention that. And I think it's important to mention that we're all different. We all live differently. We all grieve differently. And if you don't feel like getting phone calls, that's okay too. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think, what you're saying, the important thing is to, at least reach out to that person. And like you were to your friend, even just saying, "I don't know what to say or do, and what do you need?" That's so helpful and means so much. And for the listeners who maybe have felt like, when they've lost someone, they want to isolate themselves or they want to push people away. That's okay.
Yeah. Grieving is a very individual process.
It's an individual process. And when you're ready for the companionship and when you're ready for the support, reach out, when you're ready. It's so important, because when we're grieving, we don't want to also feel judged for the way that we're grieving, or that we're like not grieving the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's no right way.
No, there is no right way. For sure, there is no right way. It's very individual. And if you have the support of people who understand you and don't invalidate your experience, I think even if it's just one person, it's important. Grief has to be witnessed. I think if you isolate yourself for a long time, from time to time, I do lock myself and I cry and I look at pictures and things like that. But I also am with people and I talk and share. But if you isolate yourself, then it's not going to get better. Alone, we can't get through hard times alone, for sure. As human beings, we need other people. So that has been very valuable for me in this process.
And similarly, I've run support groups for people who've lost loved ones. And another thing we talk about is there's typically two types of people who like what you're doing, talking about their experience, talking about their feelings. And then there's other people who like to keep very busy.
Yeah.
And they make checklists and they exercise or they cook and go grocery shopping, whatever it is. I know it's kind of different during the pandemic, but it might seem like they're not processing their feelings. I think you and I tend to be the more outgoing and talking about our feelings more, but folks who like to keep busy, they're processing in their own way.
Yeah.
And, and that's okay too. But, there definitely seems to be like, people grieve one or the other. And then other people notice, like you said, they have bursts of time where they are just trying to preoccupy themselves. And then they can go back to the reflection and the processing of the feelings.
Yeah, because life goes on, right? I think the only way to honor the dead is by living your life well. You need to take care of yourself and live your life. Like, I'm working. People are like, oh, are you working? Are you going to do that class? Are you going to do that? Yeah. Like, I didn't cancel anything because I also needed to be part of something larger and do the class to feel normal, right? Like you said, keep busy. But if I isolate myself, then that's also no use, I'm doing it in parallel. One of my listeners, Julie, is like, wow, I'm amazed, Anna. She said, if I was in your place, I would be just sitting there so upset and angry and just wanting to punch a wall. I said, Julie, I have those moments too. But I also live life and go for a walk and cook. And it's like, yes, the grief, sometimes it's in the foreground and then it's in the background. It's like you hold both together. I don't know. That's how it is for me. Like the grieving is part of my day-to-day life, but I also live my life.
And you also have like prior to this, you've had a really strong purpose in your life of, helping parents create really meaningful relationships with their children. And from our conversation today, I'm seeing how your relationship with your dad has a lot to do with that. You want to see children around you have that similar dynamic with their parents, where they feel understood, they feel loved, they feel like their parent gets them, and they feel safe to share their concerns. They feel like kind of like a conspirator, like in this life, like just, we can talk about all of it. And I'm safe and understood. And I feel like that is like quite a legacy that your dad has created.
Yeah.
And think about all the listeners who benefit from his loving parenting style.
For sure. You said it better than I would have ever say. One thing that he gave me that I'm so passionate about is he never crushed my spirit. He never wanted me to be someone else. He encouraged me to be my authentic self. And I always was in touch and I always knew. And I never understood the value of it until I do the work now, how people are just trying to find themselves in their late adult years as parents, because their parents didn't see them or honor them, or they're disconnected from their authentic self for whatever reason. And that is the biggest gift that like my dad gave me. And I never struggled with that, to be myself, my weird, quirky, expressive. He loved every aspect who I was, and he encouraged me to be that. And he encouraged me not only silently by supporting me, but also encouraging me like verbally to that's an asset, that you need to be your true self in this world, and no one can take that away or shake it away, like beat it out of you. Like, it was so ingrained in me. I'm so grateful for that. That's the biggest gift. And when I was talking to my daughter about those things, she says, wow, mommy, you sound like your dad. That's what you're giving me. I'm like, wow. I wish, I'm hoping for it. And maybe it is coming through because that's my aim, right? Not to raise children in a way that they have to recover one day from their childhoods.
Yeah.
Like many of us are just, many adults that I work with are just trying to recover from what was done or not done to them in their childhoods.
And really bringing it back to that soft front and strong back.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, you get to build your child's back, help them be really strong.
Yeah.
And we're coming to them with strength and also the softness. And I think that, it lives on, it cultivates and the healing work that we do to heal ourselves and to grow our children in healthy ways. I mean, it's like a garden, you keep reaping the benefits of it as each generation goes along.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really so beautiful.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel good. Thank you.
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure we talk about?
No, I think at the moment, I think it was all right. I wanted to share. I wanted to tell certain stories. That's important. I'm doing all right. People ask me, "How are you doing, Anna?" I'm doing all right. I'm a grown up. There are days, there are moments, like I open the refrigerator and I see the peanut butter jar, and I purchased the most expensive peanut butter that there is, $12 I paid for this jar, and it has special value to me. As I reach for the peanut butter, I cry, and my friend sent me a certificate. I received in the mail that they planted a tree to honor my dad in Armenia. She ordered through this service. And when I received it, it says a tree was planted in honor of such and such. I held it and I'm like, wow, I'm going to tell my dad about this. Like, there are moments that I want to fix something in my mind so I can share with my dad on the phone call. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? There are those moments in the day that are hard. Yeah. Well, we should wrap this up. Thank you for doing this. I hope it's helpful for the listener. At least I shared my story. I didn't want to pause the podcast and have a big announcement and make it more dramatic than it needs to be. I think my grief is personal. I don't talk about this stuff on social media. A friend asked me, how come I didn't see a post on Facebook that you lost your dad? I'm like, because if you knew me, I'm not that type of person. I said, I don't need other people's thoughts and prayers on Facebook. I have real people in my life who care and call and talk to me, and I'm a private person, but the podcast is different. It means a lot to me, the podcast, and it's its own container. And I wanted to tell my listener, myself, what I'm going through. And I know many people will reach out because some of them, most of them don't know, right? A small group knows the tight-knit community that we have, but most of them don't know. And whoever cares, they care. Whoever doesn't, it's not an obligation. But yeah.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to share. And I'm not surprised that you're so willing to share. And I really want to acknowledge you for always being such a loving presence in the lives of all of us who are trying to survive as parents. You don't claim it's easy. You don't claim to have any quick fixes. You're so authentic yourself, and you help us all feel heard and as you said, I'm sure folks are really going to want to reach out to you and are going to take a lot from this episode. I think it was really a really great idea to share this.
Yeah, I really deliberately wanted to share while I was going through it, and not, and instead of waiting for a time to pass, and because I also wanted to share the raw parts of it for me and for the listener. I think that's important. Instead of like a year goes by and I come and I announce that, oh, this is what I learned, this is what I went through. I think it's also important while you're going through something to talk about it too. Or maybe someone is going through something right now. So reach out, whoever you are. Don't be shy. Don't feel embarrassed, even if you don't know what to say. My phone number is available. Somebody recently called and I picked up and she said, oh my gosh, it's a real number. It's a real person. It's you who answers the phone. I'm like, yeah. And it's like, it's my number. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Christy. A warm hug to you, and we'll meet in person soon.
Yeah. You're so welcome. And anytime. I'm always here for you.
Yeah. And we did talk about death. Yeah. Well, thank you.